The Matthews family was woken early by a knock that echoed through their quiet home. Sarah, the youngest, opened the front door to find a plain envelope lying on the doormat. As their mother, Lisa, approached with coffee in hand, Sarah handed her the envelope, confused. "It's from the HOA," she said, her brow furrowing. Curiosity quickly turned to dread as Lisa tore it open. The room grew silent. "They've taken Max," she finally said, her voice trembling. "They claim he was roaming." But Max had never left the yard. A sturdy fence surrounded their beloved companion, a German shepherd with a heart as big as his bark. "This can't be happening," she muttered, frustration boiling over. "Let me see that." James, Sarah's older brother, reached for the letter. His anger was palpable as he read aloud the HOA's formal language, which dripped with self-righteousness. "We have taken possession of your dog due to repeated violations of community regulations." The sound of those words hung in the air like a dark cloud. "What do we do now?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with worry. James slammed the letter down on the table. "We contact animal control. We have to get Max back." The urgency in his voice urged the family into action. They divided their tasks. Lisa would call the HOA, while James and Sarah would scour the neighborhood for any leads. Hours turned into a chaotic blur of phone calls and frantic searches, but every route led to a dead end. The HOA offered no answers, their smug authority shutting down every attempt to appeal. "Max is out there, and we'll find him," James vowed, driven by a sense of urgency that felt like a ticking clock. Days passed, and the desperation settled like a weight on their chests. Each search yielded nothing, and the absence of their loyal friend left a palpable void in the home. Then, a glimmer of hope appeared. James received a call from a reliable friend who had heard whispers about a dog matching Max's description seen far away, in a rundown area across the state. "Jake, we can't let this go," he declared, determination strong in his voice. Knowing well that they had to act, Jake packed his belongings without delay. He couldn't shake the image of Max's hopeful eyes from his mind. "Hold tight, buddy," he whispered to himself, as he set off on the treacherous journey, with each mile amplifying his resolve. As he drove into the unknown, uncertainty pricked at him. Who would hold Max captive? What would he find at the end of this road? Each question pushed Jake faster, his heart racing with the thought of saving his brother's dog. He swore to himself that he wouldn't return without Maximum. The closer he got, the more the urgency of his mission took hold. Little did he know, the fight for Max was just around the corner, a fight that would test their family's courage and unravel the very foundation of the HOA's authority. The whispers of the community were growing louder, and Jake could sense change in the air, but first, he had to find Max. As he neared the location detailed in the tip, anticipation mixed with dread. Deep into an area he'd never visited, surrounded by dense woods and rundown shacks, Jake slowed down. Something pulled at his gut. It was time to find out if Max was still waiting for him. Each moment felt like an eternity, and just then, he spotted it, a flicker of movement that sent shockwaves through his entire being. There it was, an old, weather-beaten shack hidden away, and by its side, his loyal companion, Max, chained and alone. "Max!" he shouted, rushing forward. But as Jake reached for the chain, voices rose behind him, the overwhelming presence of authority looming as the HOA arrived with a vengeance. "Max!" Jake shouted, rushing forward. But as he reached for the chain, voices rose behind him. The overwhelming presence of authority loomed as the HOA representatives, their faces twisted with indignation, emerged from the trees. They had been waiting, ready to reclaim what they believed was theirs. "Step away from that dog," barked one of the leaders, a stout man with a clipboard. "That animal is property of the HOA. We have the right to seize him for trespassing." "Seize him?" Jake's voice trembled with anger. "You have no right to take him from my brother. You can't just chain him up like this." He looked down at Max, whose eyes flickered with recognition. The gentle wag of his tail conflicted with his obviously weak condition. "Property. This is a living being," Jake exclaimed, moving closer. "Max is not just some possession you can claim and abandon. Return him to me." The representatives exchanged glances, their demeanor calculated and cold. "We were doing you a favor, Jake. Your brother was neglecting him. We had no choice but to intervene," the stout man insisted, his gaze hardening. "No choice." Jake's heart raced as the others closed in, encircling him. "You took him across state lines. You have no idea what you've done to my family." The frustration surged through him, a mix of indignation and fear for Max's safety. "Enough!" the stout man shouted, raising his hand like it was a gavel. "We will not stand here and allow you to impede our authority. Step back, or we will call the authorities." Jake hesitated, assessing the sea of faces. He could feel the weight of their combined authority, but Max needed him. Gathering every ounce of courage, he reached for Max's collar, unbuckling the rusted chain in one swift motion. The moment the chain fell away, Max leaped into Jake's arms, nuzzling against him as if trying to understand the whirlwind around them. The HOA men's composure shifted, fury surfacing like a tidal wave. "If you think you can just take him and walk away, you're sorely mistaken," one of them yelled, but Jake was already moving, getting Max to his feet and racing towards his truck parked just up the gravel path. "Jake, get in!" he yelled, opening the door. Max stumbled slightly, but the sound of his brother's voice spurred him forth. In a flurry of adrenaline, they jumped into the vehicle. The engine roared to life, and with a squeal of tires, they sped down the narrow road. "Did you see the way they were treating him?" Jake gasped, glancing at Max, who was panting heavily in the back seat. "I can't believe they thought they could actually keep him." The adrenaline faded, replaced by a wave of worry. Max looked frail, his fur matted and dirty. "We need to get you home, buddy." "I'm so sorry for what you've been through," Jake murmured, reaching back to scratch Max behind the ears, trying to comfort him in the chaos of emotions swinging within him. As they hit the main road, a realization struck Jake like a lightning bolt. This was just the beginning. They hadn't just stolen Max, they had violated his family's rights in the process. The fight wouldn't stop here. It couldn't. Once they arrived back home, Jake hurried Max inside, immediately assessing the situation. The place felt lifeless without the usual bounce of their beloved dog, and the tension still hung in the air. James, waiting anxiously, rushed in as the door swung open. "Did you get him?" he asked breathlessly, his eyes darting between Jake and Max. Jake nodded, barely able to contain his anger. "But it's not over. They're going to try to take him again. We have to stand up to them." James clenched his fists. "They can't just take our dog. We need proof of what they did, and we need to spread the word about this." As the gravity of their situation settled in, the brothers joined forces, brainstorming ideas about how to fight back against the HOA. They would need to gather evidence and rally support from their neighbors, folks who had been victimized before. But first, Max needed care. His health and spirits were far more important. Together, they loaded up the family van, deciding to make a visit to the veterinarian. It was a start, a step towards healing not just for Max, but for the entire family. As they drove, Jake's mind raced with thoughts of justice and what it would take to protect Max and their rights as pet owners. Deep within him lay a growing determination, a fire ignited by the injustices faced, now propelling them forward into a fight they could not ignore. As they pulled into the veterinary clinic parking lot, Jake's heart raced. Max lay panting in the back seat, his frame frail and tired. "I'll get him," Jake said, immediately jumping out of the van. He opened the back door and gently lifted Max into his arms, carrying him toward the entrance. The dog looked up at him with trust, and it filled Jake with a mix of determination and despair. Inside, the vet was quick to assess Max's condition. "He's dehydrated and malnourished," Dr. Chen stated, her brow furrowing as she examined the dog. "We'll need to run some tests and start him on fluids." While they waited, Jake and James filled Dr. Chen in on what had happened. Their anger was palpable as they recounted the events. "They treated him like a piece of property," Jake said, his voice rising. "We can't let them get away with this." Dr. Chen listened intently. "You're right to be concerned. This is a violation of many animal rights laws. You may want to document everything, photos, any evidence of how he was treated. It could become important in your fight against the HOA. As the vet took Max into the back for treatment, the brothers sat in a quiet corner of the clinic, the weight of the world pressing down on them. What if they come after us? James asked, anxiety etched on his face. We need a plan. We can't just sit back and wait for them to strike again. Let's gather support, Jake replied, his mind racing through the neighborhood. People need to know that they aren't the only ones targeted by the HOA. We can't be the only ones who've suffered under their rules. With renewed purpose, they left the clinic once Max was stabilized, planning to organize a neighborhood meeting. They spent the entire evening drafting flyers and posting them around their suburban community, each word more potent than the last. By sunset, a sense of camaraderie filled their hearts. People began reaching out, sharing their own stories of frustration and fear about the overreach of the HOA. The following day, a modest crowd gathered in their backyard, curiosity and concern flickering on their faces. James stood on a makeshift platform made from a repurposed ladder, the gathered friends and neighbors watching intently. We've all dealt with them, James began, his voice steady. The HOA thinks they can decide what we do with our lives, with our homes, and even our pets. We cannot let this continue. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Jake took his turn, eyeing the faces of their friends and neighbors. We need to stand united. If we gather enough evidence and present it, we can hold the HOA accountable for their actions. It'll show them they can't threaten us anymore. The group erupted into discussions, ideas flowing like water. They would band together, share experiences, and document every misstep the HOA had taken. A sense of empowerment washed over them. It was as though they were finally taking control of their lives. As the meeting concluded, one neighbor, a woman named Carla, stepped forward, a mix of determination and fear in her eyes. I've been meaning to speak up. They tried to seize my cat last year, claiming I didn't have the proper paperwork. I was too scared to fight back. Encouraged by her bravery, others chimed in, revealing similar tales of intimidation. Each story only further fueled their collective resolve, solidifying the group into a coalition ready to take action. They took notes, planned follow-ups, and agreed to gather evidence over the coming weeks, fully embracing their newfound purpose. With each passing day, Jake and James felt the momentum building. They began to collect documentation, capturing incidents where the HOA had exerted its authority unfairly against other residents. But as they pressed forward, a dark storm cloud lingered. Max's health was still fragile. Just as they began to feel like they were making progress, a new twist awaited them. On one fateful afternoon, a knock echoed at the door, and when Jake opened it, his heart sank. Standing there were representatives from the HOA, armed with their demands and a threatening ultimatum. This time, they intended to take the fight to court. The battle against the HOA was about to escalate, and the stakes were higher than ever. What would they do now? The weight of the HOA representatives' presence pressed heavily upon Jake as they stood in the doorway, their smug smiles grating against the urgency of the moment. We're here to discuss your defiance, the stout man intoned, his voice dripping with condescension. It seems you believe you can rally the neighborhood against us, but we assure you, this will not end well for you. Jake's heart raced, but he forced himself to meet the man's gaze, a steady resolve replacing his initial shock. You've already crossed the line by taking maximum. You can't intimidate us into silence anymore. We've got stories, people willing to speak up, and we won't back down. The representative smirked, glancing at his cohorts as if Jake's words were nothing more than a joke. Oh, we've heard the rumors circulating the neighborhood. But make no mistake, we intend to take legal action against you all for slander and for encouraging this coalition, he said, emphasizing the word with disdain. Our attorneys will be in touch. With that, they turned to leave, but Jake wasn't finished. You think this is over? We will show you how serious we are. It's time the neighborhood stands together against your tactics. As the door closed behind them, Jake felt a rush of adrenaline. The threats from the HOA only solidified their cause. This was no longer just about Max. It was about standing up for all the families living under the shadow of the HOA's tyranny. Jake! James called from the kitchen, where he had been eavesdropping. What are we going to do? "We're going to prepare," Jake replied, urgency lacing his tone. "We need to gather every piece of evidence, every voice willing to stand with us, and plan our next steps. We're not backing down." Over the next few days, the brothers worked tirelessly. They met with neighbors, collected written statements, and took photos of any signs of unfair practices by the HOA. The neighborhood fueled their energy with determination. Their community felt alive with purpose. As they pieced together their case, Dr. Chen offered her support, providing medical documentation regarding Max's condition as evidence of the HOA's neglect. The coalition grew, and even residents who had once been timid emerged with stories of their own, each tale a thread, weaving together a powerful narrative against the domineering authority. When the time came for the scheduled court hearing, the atmosphere was charged with apprehension and hope. Jake and James arrived at the courthouse alongside their neighbors. More than 50 faces gathered in solidarity. As they stepped inside, the sight of the HOA's smug representatives was a stark reminder of their foe. "We stand united," Jake whispered to the gathered neighbors, feeling the collective strength coursing through them. They took their seats, the tension palpable. The trial began with a counterclaim brought forth by the HOA. Their lawyers painted a picture of chaos, accusing Jake and James of inciting rebellion and disorder. Yet, one by one, the community members took the stand, unwavering in their resolve. They shared their stories, speaking against the practices of the HOA that had long silenced them, forcing many to live in fear. Finally, it was Jake's turn. He stood tall in front of the judge, the weight of his community resting on his shoulders. "We're here to fight for our right to live freely, for the health and happiness of our pets, and for a community that's supportive rather than oppressive. Max isn't just a dog, he's part of our family. No authority has the right to tear that apart." The courtroom fell silent, his words resonating across the room. The judge listened intently, nodding along as the emotional weight unfolded before them. As the hearing progressed, it became evident that the HOA had underestimated the community's strength. The judge's expression shifted, her demeanor growing stern as she weighed the evidence. Finally, as they collectively held their breath, the verdict was announced. "Due to a lack of substantial evidence on the HOA's part and based on testimonies of harassment from residents, I am ruling in favor of the defendants," the judge declared, a firm tone underscoring her decision. "The HOA will need to modify its guidelines to reflect the rights of the community members, particularly in matters concerning pets." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Jake's heart soared as he realized they had truly won. They had stood together against the tide, and the ripple effect was undeniable. As Max barked in joyous recognition upon their return home, Jake knelt down, tears of relief and happiness streaming down his face. "We did it, boy. We did it for you." In that moment, they realized their fight had only begun. It was a beacon of hope for others in similar situations. They had ignited change, and together, they would continue to stand guard against injustice, ensuring that no family would have to face the intimidation of authority alone again.